Good afternoon, everyone. Today to another exciting episode of BWHR Voices. Today we have with us Mr. Rajneesh Vashisht, Global People Business Partner at Ericsson India. We welcome you, sir. It's a pleasure for us to be speaking with you.
Thank you so much, Sugan, for calling.
So, today's discussion is as interesting as all our other, topics and discussions have always been, and fruitful as well. Today's discussion is on the topic India's economic success. Is executive compensation a key factor to it or not? So just an introduction of what, we understand from this conversation and from this topic and what exactly, we will be talking about. So over past few decades, India has emerged as one of the fastest growing economies in the world with a sustained period of rapid economic expansion. During this time, there has been a significant rise in executive pay in India, not much to be honest. While some may view this trend as a cause of concern, others argue that it's a natural consequence of country's economic growth. In fact, there is also an evidence that states that to suggest that there is a rise in executive pay in India, which is closely correlated to country's relative faster economic growth. Now, this correlation raises a number of important questions about relationship between executive compensation and economic growth. So in today's discussion, we will explore the factors that have contributed to the rise in executive pay in India, as well as broader implications of this trend for country's economic and society. So, sir, my first question to you is, what are some of the factors that have contributed to the rise in executive pay in India, and how is this rise in India linked to relatively faster economic growth in the country, or if it is the case so or not?
Well, Sugandh, it's an interesting question. The question which you're asking is that whether rise of executive pay is correlated with the economic growth in India,
Exactly.
and then or vice versa.
Right.
This is not the trend in India. This is globally everywhere that executive pays have moved faster than the pays of, average pays or the pays of the bottom of the pyramid of the organizations. See, if you look at it, there are many factors, many industries, especially the IT industry, in which India has made the substantial leaps and growth. If let's say China is a manufacturing story, India is an IT services story. Right. So in that sector, there has been an humongous growth in the kind of work which has been happening in India. I don't have the figures at hand, but it must have been hundreds of billions of dollars with the business which is happening in India. It's but natural that the top leaders for that industries are going to be paid far more, and their growth in the compensation is going to be far more faster than the other executives in the industry. So, yes, there has been a growth of the executive pay, especially in IT conglomerate. And this is in correlation or is in sync with what's happening across the globe. The people are being paid as much insane salaries in every part of the world, including America and Europe, as it is happening in India. So yes, it's quite linked to the economic growth. I mean, if these industries are generating so much of revenues to the companies, then why wouldn't they be paid such high salaries?
Okay, so you agree to the fact that there is a correlation to it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, how it can be possible if the economic growth has not happened and the people are getting very high salary? Exactly. It might not have happened. So there is an economic growth, and that actually is there is a cascading effect on the salaries of executive. I mean, this is only we are talking the
only for executive class, yes.
Yes, if you'll talk about the salaries of the general masses, that's another different story. And when we look at in the income disparities, then it becomes an interesting take.
And according to you, what broader economic context should be considered when analyzing the impact of executive pay on economic growth in India, and some potential solutions to address this, income inequality related to executive pay?
See, So the question what you're asking is, now it's a reverse thing which is asking is that
Right.
whether the economic growth is because of an increase in the executive pay. I mean, this becomes very, very complex. I have never heard of any such argument like such. So thank you for asking. And, this is making you think. Well, see, let's take the example of the top IT companies in India. The chief executive of those organizations are leading an organization anywhere between 200,000 employees to the number one employer, maybe having 500,000 to 600,000 employees. It was unthinkable 20 years back. Now, is it happened because executive, compensation is very high and we are paying through our nose to such people? If this assertion would have been true, we wouldn't be having another discussion or about the quality of manpower. The entry level engineers are not as high qualified. And the question about the ability of people who are joining the corporate world, and which has been questioned for last couple of decades now. So the growth of industry is not only linked to the people who are leading from the top, but also about how the bottom of the organization is qualitatively getting better. They are able to deliver. So it's a mix of course, the people who are at the top are leading, and had they not be at the helm of affairs, things might have been difficult to grow. And but this is only half of the story. The other half of the story is that there are people, very qualified, English speaking, analytically strong people who have been entering in the organization, and they are the one also responsible for economic growth which has happened in India.
Okay. And do you think there are certain pertinent solutions to such an economic disparity in the executive pay in India? Because you very rightly said, so the correlation is on between the top firms only, because there are not many companies or a handful of companies who have 200 or 500,000 lakh kind of employee base. They're not much. So do you think there are solutions to such such income disparities, in the executive pay class, specifically in India?
So there are two schools of thought going on, Sugan. Good. I mean, this is where the crux of the discussion is lying, is that there are two schools of thoughts. I was reading the one of an Harvard article in 80s, and it was telling the executives are not being paid as high and are not being paid. Their pay is not in correlation to the success of the organization. And not only they are being paid less, but also they are being paid. There is very less variable component there in that. So this is, what they were making an assertion is that there is a business case of people at the top of the organization needs to be paid higher component, which is performance linked, so that they are able to take the organizations to the next level. Now, if you look at the executive salaries in India, that's precisely what has happened. The storyline which is there, somebody is being paid 10 crore or 80 crore, and they don't. I mean, these are misleading headlines because it doesn't talk how much of that is fixed and how much of that is variable. And if I did some bit of study, the large part, maybe higher than 50, 60 or 70% is being paid as a variable. And the variable is only paid if there is a success in the organization. So one part, this is actually, I see that there is a merit. On the other side, there are critiques which are saying is that how in our kind of a country where the average income is $2,000 or maybe even lesser than that, how people are being paid like crores and crores of the salary.
Exactly.
And if in case
news has also been erupted when recently Sundar Pichai's annual income was named in the media itself, and people were questioning.
Well, Sundar Pichai is, let's say, in US, so I'm actually, if we include them, okay, fine. Let's include Sundar Pichai and all of the people globally into this talk.
Right.
My question is that, there is another school of thought, and they are looking at it from ethical lens. They are not looking it from the financial or the economic or the capitalistic lens. So, the ethical lens is that how's that in an organization where people are paying 3 lakh and 3.5 lakh rupees of salary at the bottom of the pyramid. And there are people, I actually was reading that the salaries of the bottom of the organization, especially in big IT services companies, have remained stagnant in last 10, 15 years. So how is that the top of organization is improving, is actually increasing, but the bottom of the pyramid is not? So they are looking at it as an ethical lens. Well, I actually would want to demystify a little bit, because both of the parties are telling the half truth. If you look at it this in conjunction, organizations are an open system. If in case if you do not pay adequate salaries at every layer in the organization, be that bottom, the system will take care of itself, and they are taking care of itself, because in last 2 years there has been an attrition of 30, 35, 40, 45, 50% in certain organizations.
Exactly.
Because people have moved to better paying salaries. So, to look at like this, 10 years back, the people were paying 3.5 lakh rupees, and now they are also being paid 3.5 lakh rupees. It's an erroneous assertion. Because let's look at like this, people who started working 10 years back, where have they reached now? Have their salaries increased by 10 times or not? And the CEOs which started 10 years back, they cannot become CEO number one, CEO. There is no further growth. So their growth is how they are expanding the organization. So if their salaries have increased by 10 times, the salaries of the people who joined in, let's say 10 years back, must have also increased by 10, if not 10, it might have increased by 5, 6, 7% times. So yes, these are two different comparisons we are doing. And if the assertion is that we are not paying at the bottom of the pyramid, people are increasing their salaries by moving out. The best thing which needs to be done is that we have to look at the salaries, which was the starting salaries, and let's say 10 years back. And then we have to see that the salaries of entry level should have an added component of inflation. So their salary should also increase by the inflation, which hasn't happened. This is something needs to be looked into. But to make a comparison that CEOs have increased by 10 times, but the bottom of the pyramid is not increased by 10 times, these are two different things we're talking about. We'll have to look at people. Who are the people 10 years back started working, and where are they now, and what are their salaries? And as I said, they must have also increased by 10 times. So, that's how I look at it. I think these are people.
So the analysis that you've made with the example is very apt, because we need a metrics to see and to decide as to whether the salaries are actually increasing or they're increasing just by experience. If they're increasing just by experience, then, salaries of the lower pyramid people not increasing by 10x is justified, because then their experience.
10 years back, they were doing the same responsibility, and 10 years now, the entry level, they are doing the more or less same work.
Exactly.
And if they are doing the same work, only the inflation parts needs to be baked into it. But for the CEO, 10 years back, they were leading an organization, let's say 1 billion. Now they're leading the organization 100 billion. So their scope of work has actually expanded. So it is justifiable to pay those salaries. But, usually, Sugandh, what happens is that, let's say, especially in media or wherever, there is a tendency of sensationalizing and comparing two different things, and people get dragged into that conversation. And everybody looks at it from the part view, which interests them, and not look at the whole. The whole says that it's an open system. If there is something which is happening unethical or illogical, the system corrects itself, because it's an open system. And, the systems are adaptive, and things change a course. And if anything is happening which is not logical, it will correct on its own. And that's what has happened.
Now, according to you, what do you feel? Is there increase in the foreign investment in India related to rise in executive pay in India? What could be some of the criticisms of the correlation between executive pay and economic growth in India? Because that's a very pertinent question.
Well, for us to make an assertion that, because executive salaries have increased, the FDI is increasing, I really don't know if there is a correlation, or maybe
Okay.
I'm not able to think through. It might be a vice versa, in which because there is a lot of FDI, the organizations are improving, and FDI is happening not because the executives are being paid too high, but because there is a general talent available, and not only talent, the talent is available in English speaking. They are in huge numbers, and because a lot of work is coming in, the executives are taking more complexer works, and because of that their salaries are increasing. So the reverse correlation may be far more poor than to do it on the other side. Maybe there must be some reasons of executives being paid higher, and that results in higher and FD, but it's an interplay of two things, and vice versa is more stronger.
Fair enough. Now, the basic agenda of an employer is to, let's say, provide, equal income to people across a variety of sectors that they've been deployed into, considering the kind of work that they're doing. How, in your view, can companies in India balance the need to reward top executives while also promoting greater income equality? These two things, the promotion as well as
See,
rewarding, needs to be in parity, so that, people don't feel that I am only being in a segment wherein my salary is increasing, but then there is no recognition of the kind of work I am doing. And maybe then we fall down to the question where you think ki 10 years back bhi data entry wala was doing the same work, and 10 years baad bhi, if we are hiring the talent in the similar segment, they're doing the same work.
See, Sugan, let me add another rejoinder to what you said. Income equality in itself is a disastrous thing. We have lived, there is an element of, let's say, socialism there in that, and it has been proven that it has miserably failed, in which there is an income equality, and it's like everybody is paid equal, or maybe very less difference between high performing and low performing. No, it doesn't make sense. There has to be some bit of inequality basis on performance, competence, capability, and stuff like that. But at the same time, I'm not making an assumption that income inequality is only gives benefits. There are certain advantages of having some equity as well. And equity doesn't mean to have equal wages. It means that there has to be a better correlation of performance and salaries. So those correlations somewhere are, people are not as, let's say, qualified, are not giving as much results, but their salaries are increasing because of other factors, despite performance. And that is a problem. So, as in leaders in India and everywhere, continuously keep on looking, how can we have a stronger correlation between performance?
Right.
And I think, I don't see you now, but that's so income inequality is required, but beyond a point it becomes unsustainable. At the same time, we'll have to look at the performance reward correlation needs to be stronger, and it's a complicated, and it requires some far more serious work than what it is happening now.
When you say there is far more serious work required, do you have any set of strategies or points in mind that can actually be included within an organization's policy framework?
Well, it's like this, that are you able to measure the performance of the people both in short and the long run? Okay. In a more objective manner than what it is currently. And also, are we able to measure performance not only at the individual level, but also at the group level? Okay. And a lot of focus is on the individual performance, but organizations succeed or fail as a group, as a team. So we'll have to we'll have to look at performance metrics on the group level, while on the individual level we have already excelled. That's one part which is needed to be done. In the second part, which is that are we able to see what in long run the equity the person are creating, because we are very short term focused, and somebody got a sales of X and we reward them hugely, but that X, how it has been brought in, is something is for the long run going to impact either damage the organization or make the organization more sustainable. The
Right.
long-term impact needs to be measured by the people who are working on the performance management of the organization. But it doesn't happen because usually we are short-term focused. The humans are usually short-term focused because in long run, nobody knows what's going to happen. But companies thrive, sustain only on the basis of long-term. But usually the short-term imperatives become far more important because of evolutionary reasons, because of how humans are designed. So long-term focus and group focus on performance needs to be one immediate factor where performance reward specialists and the leaders in general needs to focus on, which is the gigantic task.
In your view, do you think companies today are actually following these mandates and keeping these points in mind while deciding or increasing the salaries of executive pay leaders, specifically in the Indian context?
Well, as I said, in the executive, if you look at the salaries of everybody as a cursory glance, if you go a little deeper, the salaries are divided into two parts. They get lesser fixed part and there is a large variable part.
Right.
So, if the top of the organization who is actually setting the strategic direction of the company is not being suitably compensated for setting that direction right, then we have a history of failed organization in the public sector enterprise. Why was that? Because there was no incentive for doing a better work. So, I think, there is as I said, it's an open system. So things are taken care of on its own. I mean, there is, if you pay too much to your executive leaders, then, people beneath will leave, or if you pay too less, they will leave. So, this is an open system in which system is taking care of it. So I'm reasonably convinced that, they are being paid as per what they are expected to deliver. And then they are not being paid, and only thing which may be added further, which I'm not sure is being added, is that if they are being paid so much for the success, how are they being penalized for the failures? One of the which is something a very touchy discussion. I'm not sure of whether we are matured enough to do something like that.
Fair enough. Thank you so much, sir, for such analytical talk and discussion with all the key points and the examples that you've quoted. It clearly boils down to the point that, the discussion is reaping out fruits. And in a way, whatever we were questioning that, is there a gap? Yes, there is a gap, but you've clearly, explained it with your analysis as to why is there this gap and how can we actually, look it from a different lens to it and, compare it on a different level. Of course, comparisons need to have a different level to it. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a complicated, Sugandh, maybe 25 minutes or half an hour maybe not be sufficient.
Exactly.
But, this is something very sensitive for the organizational success. And not only to look at from the executive salary lens, but also the salaries of the people down in the organization.
Right.
And then there are more dimension and more lenses to look at from. And if we'll get a time, we'll speak again sometime.
Indeed, sir. Indeed. For now, thank you so much for joining us, for giving us your time and the analysis that you've brought to this discussion, very rightly quoted by you, that, it is something that needs to be discussed because it is creating hype in market and people feel that it's only the executive level that gets paid. But, as your reading said, in 80s, people in the executive level, they felt that, they're not being paid according to the kind of work that they're doing. So kudos to your efforts, sir. Thank you so much for joining us and for giving out your valuable insights to it.
Thank you so much, Sugandh.